I want you to picture it's August 25th, 1777, and you're standing here on the cliffs overlooking where the Elk River here meets the Chesapeake Bay in the background there. What you would have seen is 18,000 British soldiers on 300 British vessels under the commands of both General and Admiral Howe coming up the Elk River here, and they would have landed about 7 miles to the northwest of here. But again, if you were standing here August 25th, 1777, you would have seen approximately 300 British vessels come through here, carrying upwards of 18,000 British soldiers. And that would have been some sight to see. So as we go on to our Battle of Brandywine video, I thought this was the most fitting place for us really to start, because the British could not get up Delaware Bay. They had to come down to the Chesapeake. Again, the Chesapeake's in the background there. Then they took the Elk River here. And they took the Elk River about 7 miles to the north of here. They got off on the northwestern shore. And from there, they made their march up into Kennett Square. So as we do our Battle of Brandywine video, I figured this would be the most fitting first stop. And from here, we're going to go into the heart of Kennett Square, which is where General Cornwallis and General Howe would have spent the night, as well as General von Kynphausen. So we'll talk about him a little bit later as we talk about the full development of the Battle of Brandywine, segment by segment here. So here we are on stop 2. We are in the lovely Kennett Square. And let's look at our Kennett Square placard here. The Crown Forces Encampment. By midday, September 10th, 1777, 2 Crown Force columns arrived at Kennett Square Village. One column camped east of the village along 723 Road, modern-day McFarland Road, while the other column camped along 720 Road, Route 82. General Howe, Cornwallis, and Kynphausen finalized their marching plans here in Kennett Square. At daybreak on September 11, 1777, Kynphausen's column of approximately 6,500 soldiers, including Ferguson's riflemen, marched eastward. They would have went down what's called Great Post Road, modern-day Route 1. Marching north would have been General Howe and General Cornwallis that led the column of over 8,000 elite soldiers to outflank General Washington's position at the Battle of Brandywine. And we're going to take a look at that later at our 2 stops at Birmingham Hill and Sandy Hollow Park. So now we're heading up Union Street here, heading southbound to State and Union Street, the intersection that really combines Great Post Road with Route 82 here. And this is where the British would have encamped. It would have been here in Kennett Square that the loyalists to the British would have told General Howe and General Cornwallis about the 2 unguarded fords, Trimble Ford and Jefferis Ford, which we're going to go look at next. Those were the 2 unguarded fords that he used in the northbound movement to outflank General Washington. Historic Kennett Square. So here we are. Kennett Square is a beautiful borough. Great place to get brunch, lunch, dinner, some drinks. They got a whole bunch of really, cool little shops here. But yeah, so this is where the British would have been by midday, and they would have spent the night here, September 10th, 1777. Now, specifically, General Howe and General Cornwallis, right, they would have went up this road. Kynphausen would have went eastbound down there to Great Post Road while heading eastbound to Chad's Ford in and of itself. So the next stop from here, we're going to check out Trimble Ford and then Jefferis Ford, the 2 unguarded fords that the British were able to cross. And it's quite poetic, honestly, because Washington had up until Buffington's Ford guarded. If he had guarded up even one more ford to Jefferis Ford, he would have been able to successfully maybe get the British to not been able to have flanked him. Chad's Ford, 6 miles away. We are on Great Post Road. This is modern day Route 1. This is the route that General Kynphausen and his 6,000 to 6,500 men, they would have come down Great Post Road here, heading directly for Chad's Ford. Now, Kynphausen has two goals, right? Do as much damage to he can, right, to the forces at Chad's Ford, and to fan out his army and try to bluff and convince Washington into thinking that that's the bulk of the British forces right there. Meanwhile, General Howe and General Cornwallis will be heading north. We're going to show you guys Trimble Ford, we're going to show you Jefferis Ford, and we're going to also show you the Birmingham route road that General Howe and General Cornwallis would have taken to crash into our right flank. So this is Great Post Road on the morning of September 11, 1777. Again, about 6,000 primarily Hessian forces, but also British forces with them too, would have headed out down this road, heading eastbound. As you saw that sign back there, we are about 6 miles from Chad's Ford. I'm sure most of you do know this, but if you did not know that, a ford is just a small crossing, right? A ford, that's what they were. A ford was a small crossing. Chad's Ford, Washington's, thinking was pretty almost maybe a little bit too standard, because yes, this is the main ford and the main route into Philadelphia. But if General Howe has shown that he's willing to take a month-long voyage to go around the Delaware Bay and come up the Chesapeake, he's shown he's willing to take the longer route. So I think I mentioned that earlier, but that's kind of one of the unfortunate things. If you look at the guards and where we're positioned on the fords, we went as far north as Buffington Ford, which stops just one shy of Jefferis Ford, and that's the east branch of the Brandywine River that they cross there. So while we're not quite at Chad's Ford yet, we're pretty much in the position where Maxwell would have first picked up General von Kynphausen and his men. General Maxwell and General von Kynphausen and their men engage in a running battle, essentially, pretty much from right about here on Great Post Road. And Kynphausen is obviously successfully able to push Maxwell and his men back over Chad's Ford from here. So they engage in a running battle from here, a number of light skirmishes compared to the rest of the Battle of the Brandywine. Some of the heaviest fighting there is on Birmingham Hill, Sandy Hollow, Heritage Park. Compared to the rest of the fighting that day, I don't want to minimize it, but yeah, this is going to be some of the light skirmishes. Maxwell is getting pushed back down Great Post Road here. And again, remember, General von Kynphausen, his goal is twofold. He wants to obviously push Maxwell and his men back. They want to start bombarding the defenses at Chad's Ford. But then he also wants to fan out his army by about 10:30 in the morning. He has his army completely fanned out in a way where it's difficult from where Washington is sitting at the Benjamin Ring House, commanding the position, going off of the information that he's getting. Washington really still can't determine whether or not he's going up the full, against the full force of the British Army here or not. It won't be until about 2 p.m. Again, it won't be about until 2 p.m. that Washington is alerted that this was a red herring, so to speak, a diversion, as General Howe is taking the bulk of the forces to crash into his right flank. Howe wants to catch Washington in a pincer maneuver. It worked for him in the past, and he wants to do it here again at the Battle of the Brandywine. And let's really set the stage here. I mean, why did General Howe disregard high command and not go up to support General Burgoyne? Well, he wanted to come down here and force Washington into an open battle. He wanted to kill and or capture Washington. He wanted to crush the Continental forces, and then he wanted to take our capital city at the time in Philadelphia and essentially effectively end the war. Thankfully, due to the rear guard defense, which we'll talk about later, the rear guard defense quite literally saved Washington's life and the Continental Army's ability to continue waging war. So I know people think of the Battle of the Brandywine as a loss. Yes, on paper it is. But the Battle of the Brandywine actually really isn't a loss in the sense that if things had gone even slightly different, the Revolutionary War could have ended here at the Battle of the Brandywine. Furthermore, because Howe decided to come here on his Philadelphia campaign, and the Battle of the Brandywine is the single longest day battle in the Revolutionary War. It's one of the bloodiest battles. He's not up there to support Burgoyne in October of 1707 when we win at Saratoga, which brings the French into the war. So now here we are. We just crossed Chad's Ford, or what would have been Chad's Ford. We're at the Brandywine Art Museum here. You can see Chad's Ford Historical Society, and we're pulling in now Brandywine Museum of Art, to be specific. And let's go ahead and check the Brandywine River here. Let's check out modern day Chad's Ford. So I decided to get into the Brandywine River here. You can see it's about up to my knees. Pretty good current here, right? If you try to cover across this in full gear without a bridge or without a ford, it's not going to work out so well. But where we are in the Brandywine River. We are just behind that tree is where Chad's Ford, the actual ford and bridge, would have been. And so let's set the stage. At the ford, and pretty much from Chad's Ford up to Brenton's Ford here, is General Wayne and the Pennsylvania line. Pretty much left of center is Nathaniel Greene and his men. And coming all the way down the Brandywine River, down at Piles Ford here on the Brandywine River, is General Armstrong and the Pennsylvania militia, about 2,000 strong. Kynphausen is going to set up all across this side of the Brandywine, the western side here, the western side of the banks here, at from about 9 a.m. to about 10:30. And he's fanning out his entire army, doing his best to bluff and confuse both Washington and Washington's scouts, who are giving Washington his vital information on whether or not the bulk of the British forces are actually here at Chad's Ford. You can see the bridge in the background where the cars are crossing. That is where modern day, Chad's Ford is. Obviously, the small wooden bridge is no longer there. But we're in the Brandywine River right now. You can see in certain sections, it really does befit being called a creek. But you can see how wide that is. That's about 100 yards wide from bank to bank. And when we do get heavy rains, these waters rise, right? Just ask any of these people here. These waters will go all the way up these banks. Also, while the banks are somewhat, nice and easy here, as you can see over here, and that is really key, that's about a 10-foot embankment. If you're a fully geared up soldier, there's no way you're getting over that, You got to take Chad's Ford. And that's what they're here to ultimately do, but not before, again, bluffing about their real intentions, while General Howe and General Cornwallis are going all the way up and over. They're going to cross Trimble's Ford in the western branch of the Brandywine. Then they'll cross Jefferis Ford, and then they're going to come up Birmingham Hill. Now, as I'm on my walk out, this is actually a really perfect example. Yeah, we showed that bank, but as I look at that collection of water there, that's about 4 or 5 feet deep. And you got to remember, the average person back in 1777 does not know how to swim. Swimming became a recreational sport in the 1900s. A lot of people then, especially in the second half of the 1900s, when people had more leisure time. Most people prior to the 20th century, unless they were really wealthy, they did not know how to swim. So even a 4 to 5 foot pool like that could become deadly for certain people. If you trip, you got heavy equipment on, you get weighed down. So a lot of people really did not like crossing water if they didn't have to, especially without a ford. If they were going to cross water, right, as opposed to this, you can literally see it's a swimming pocket, swimming pool. Those are the type of swimming pockets and pools I grew up here swimming in the Brandywine. You know, they would cross this, they would be happy to cross something like this, but if they can't see the bottom, they're not going to want to cross it. So just to help kind of put you guys into the perspective of any type of Revolutionary War soldier, a Civil War soldier even, they do not like water. Anything even water up over hip deep, and understandably so, right? So if they could cross, they wanted to cross something like this, or if they could, obviously they wanted to take a ford or a bridge, as opposed to trying to have to cross rivers with steep banks, with deep pockets like that could become deadly for people. So yeah, just another thing to kind of keep in mind. Sometimes we kind of project our own modern day luxuries onto the past, but we got to keep in mind, most people back then, they don't think, oh, this is great, it's hot out, it's a swimming pocket, it's a beautiful day. They see this as a literal death trap because they don't even know how to swim. So when you think about it from that perspective, taking fords is extremely crucial. And the fact that the locals gave up both Trimble and Jefferis Ford is really, really something that essentially kind of broke the back of the Continental Army here, because that's how the British were able to successfully outmaneuver us on our right flank. And man, you can tell it's even deeper down here. D.S. Armstrong, born 1951, sadly perished in 2010. Quote was, "Live for the day." Absolutely, D. Look at that beehive. Wow. So here we are. We are at the Gideon Gilpin House. This would have been Marquis de Lafayette's headquarters during the Battle of the Brandywine. And when Marquis de Lafayette was wounded, temporarily he would have been brought back here in the afternoon before the entirety of the Continental Army escaped down Great Post Road to modern-day Concord Road into Chester from there. Now, when Howe successfully wins the Battle of the Brandywine, this will become Howe's evening quarters into the morning of September 12th there. So Howe will spend the night and the night and the morning here at the Gideon Gilpin home. Gideon Gilpin himself is a Quaker. He's neutral. He's a part of the Birmingham Friends, as they're called. That's the Quaker community. The Quakers want absolutely nothing to do with this war. That's a reoccurring theme you'll pick up when I'm making these Revolutionary Wars here, specifically in Quaker strongholds. But Gideon Gilpin had his entirety of his livestock, all of his crops, his grains, all of that were plundered by the British soldiers. So he did temporarily take up arms in the Patriot cause, in the Revolutionary War. He only did it for about a year, year and a half, but he was shunned by the entirety of his community for doing so. So he was put in a really, really difficult position because everybody knew in this small, entire farming community had entirely turned his back on him. But he had his home taken over, right? Both the Continentals were here, and then the British, the enemy. The British absolutely plundered about modern day value, about $86,000 worth of resources from Gideon Gilpin. So he had very legitimate cause to want to join the patriotic cause and the Continental Army here. So again, this is the Gideon Gilpin house. This is on the eastern side of the Battle of the Brandywine. If you look at it, essentially, right, you have two different parking lots, one on this side and another on the other side at the Benjamin Ring house, is where we're going to go next, because that's was Washington's headquarters throughout the Battle of the Brandywine. I also must say, I hope you guys appreciate sycamore trees. And we've made it, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Ring house. This was built all the way back in 1733. Wow. Benjamin Ring was asked to help lead the retreat of the Continental Army, but he was a little bit too old and a little bit too heavy-set to do it. But this would have been the headquarters of General Washington throughout the Battle of Brandywine for the most part, up until we had to finally retreat. Washington's life would have been in jeopardy. We'll talk about that in the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. Here's our placard for Christian C. Sanderson, 1882 to 1966. More than any other individual in his time, Christian Sanderson focused attention on the Battle of the Brandywine, September 11, 1777. He and his mother lived in Washington headquarters, 1906 to 1922, where they entertained thousands of visitors. Leaving the house in 1922, he stated, "I hope someday there will be a state park on the battlefield." Well, Mr. Sanderson, your wishes have come true. And thank you so much. I mean that, from one generation to the past generation, preserving history is such a vital part of remembering who we are and where we've come from, and helping us to understand the present and where we're going to head to. So this right here, the Benjamin Ring house, built 1733. They would have been thrusted, just like Gideon Gilpin and every other Quaker family, they would have been thrusted into the Battle of the Brandywine without any choice. Great Post Road, right? There's where General von Kynphausen would have come down. Where we were at on the river is about a mile or so down at Chad's Ford. So once von Kynphausen and the British and the Hessians successfully take Chad's Fords, they start moving here. Washington has to abandon. He goes up that way before heading down Great Post Road to Concord Road. As we talked about just prior, Gideon Gilpin's house will become the temporary evening and morning quarters for General Howe. So it switches from Lafayette into Howe there. And wow, man, these old colonial homes are just so cool. So this would have been built with a cellar, or maybe this was an addition, I'm not sure. That's a question for Mr. Sanderson back there. He would know. Now that's the back end of the house. The insides are both closed right now. You're allowed to walk around them. Don't touch anything, obviously, right? You know, we were at the Gideon Gilpin house. We didn't go on the deck. Don't do anything like that. But you are allowed to walk around them right now. Here looks like more storage. Could be wrong, but let's take a look. Maybe this was a well at some point, actually. Yep. This looks like maybe it was potentially a well at one point, because that's deep. That's deep, deep down. You can see the ladder taking it on down there. Now, I'm not sure if you can read that, so I'll read that for you at home. Surrendered by the Convention of Saratoga, October 17th, 1777. Wow. And that's the thing about the Battle of the Brandywine, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people look at it a loss. I don't look at it as a loss. We do not win in Saratoga without Howe deciding to make his Philadelphia campaign. He go against the high command back there in Britain. He decides he wants to come up and take Philadelphia, try to take Washington head on, crush him, capture him, and or kill him. And he wants to try to end the Continental cause right here at the Battle of the Brandywine. This is what Howe wanted. He wanted a giant open field battle, and he was pretty much victorious. Thankfully, though, the rear guard defense was successful. So when people look at the Battle of the Brandywine, you know, I'm a local here. A lot of locals almost sometimes, they don't really, they feel kind of, I'm speaking, if I'm, you know, if I'm synthesizing what I've gathered from them, almost a sense of shame that we lost here and that Saratoga won, but I don't look at it like that, right? It's not just about the battle. It was about the overall war. And if General Burgoyne was able to use General Howe in a pincer move at Saratoga, we would have lost. And as you know, obviously, the French came in after the victory of Saratoga. The French would come in. We would celebrate at Valley Forge May 6th, 1778. But yeah, what a really cool piece of artillery here. Surrendered October 17th, 1777. Wow. And this was dedicated to the Battle of the Brandywine Park Associates by the Color Guard of the Pennsylvania Society Sons of the Revolution. And this was dedicated on September 11th, 2017. So thank you very much for that, because this is such a wonderful piece of history right here. And what a fitting location for it to be at, right? This isn't any historic fort or anything like that, but I really like this because this kind of shows you kind of more can. A fort would obviously be a little bit bigger than this, but this is just what it would have been. It would have just been a very simple, basic wooden bridge, just like this. Something that really could have easily been almost thrown up in a day or two. Now, obviously, we're not crossing the Brandywine here or anything like that, but that's what fords were. When you're picturing a ford, picture just essentially a small wooden bridge like this, or if you picture it ford to ford in a sense of a ferry dock, much like in Lord of the Rings at the Brandywine crossing. How very fitting, right? They use a small boat to get across the river there. So that's really what you should think about when you think about a ford crossing. Either think about a small wooden bridge, or if it's a ferry, again, it would have looked a lot like in the Lord of the Rings there, right? It would have been a small ferry crossing from one dock to the next to safely get across the river. Because again, at this time period, most people cannot swim. Swimming is a luxury pretty much for a very handful of people. And these fords and the ferry crossings are absolutely vital to logistics of any army at that time period, whether they're fighting on American soil or European soil for that matter. So now, just to give you guys some perspective, right up over that hill is where we were at the Benjamin Ring House. I just want to give you guys kind of perspective of, it's a park you absolutely want to come and visit, but it's not like Valley Forge where you can spend hours, right? There's your visitor center there, and then about, 200-300 yards up over that hill is the Gideon Gilpin House. So if you want to come and check out the Battle of the Brandywine, absolutely, definitely do it. Make sure you guys kind of plan ahead of time the logistics because you're going to have to drive to see a lot of the places, which is fine. I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous area. These are beautiful roads, a lot of great places to stop to get, breakfast, lunch, dinner, some drinks, whatever you want to do. But make sure if you do want to come check out the Battle of the Brandywine, yeah, kind of put your pins in different places along the route. Or if you want, you can just tag along for the rest of this video. We're going to go to Trimble Ford, then we're going to go to Jefferis Ford, up Birmingham Hill. We're going to check out Birmingham Hill, Sandy Hollow Heritage Park, and the last defense of the Battle of the Brandywine at the Brinton 1704 house. That's the famous Casimir Pulaski charge, right? Nathaniel Greene gets a lot of credit, as he should, for the rear guard defense. But without Casimir Pulaski's charge, with about 30 to 40 of the the commander-in-chief's own guard, Washington himself might have very well died just up over that hill by about a mile and a half, as most accounts credit it. So the Casimir Pulaski charge doesn't get enough credit, in my personal opinion. Nathaniel Greene, a lot of times when you hear people talk about the Battle of the Brandywine, the successful rear guard defense, they talk about Nathaniel Greene. They leave out Henry Knox, General Anthony Wayne, and Casimir Pulaski. So we're going to talk about all four of those individuals at the final defense there from the property of the Brinton 1704 house. Here we are walking down to the west branch of the Brandywine River, also called the Brandywine Creek, depending upon who you ask. But here's where Trimble's Ford would have been, ladies and gentlemen. The west branch of the Brandywine River. General Howe and General Cornwallis, this was the first unguarded ford that they would have crossed right here on the west branch of the Brandywine River, September 11, 1777. If you remember back to when we started the video inside Kennett Square there, the locals let General Howe and General Cornwallis know there was two unguarded fords in particular. Trimble Ford was the first one here. The next ford we'll go and look at is Jefferis Ford. Now, as you can see all the way down in the background, not actual rapids, but if there's some actual depth, there's about 4 or 5 feet here. I grew up swimming in the Brandywine River as a kid, so there's definitely some swimming pockets as a whole. This one's a good one here. You might even be able to see that fish. Man, that's awesome. So yeah, I grew up swimming in here, and here is where Trimble's Ford would have been, ladies and gentlemen. So this would have been the first unguarded ford that about 11,000 Crown forces and Hessian soldiers under General Howe and General Cornwallis would have come. We would have known about this thanks to the locals in Kennett Square the night before, letting them know. Some of those who were sympathizers let them know that both Trimble and Jefferis Ford were unguarded. Washington did not think General Howe would come this far north. I mean, this was a very, very far march. I'm going to go silent and just let you guys kind of enjoy this spot here for a minute. This is the east branch of the Brandywine River. This is where 15,000 forces under General Howe and General Cornwallis, right up the river there at Jefferis Ford, would have crossed the second unguarded ford on their way towards routing the Continental forces crashing into our right flank there. Right here where we're at, this is, pretty much an untouched part of the river still, all these centuries later. Sadly, the bridge is out of commission, so we cannot cross it right now. But here we are. This is the site of Jefferis Ford. This is where 11,000 Crown forces under General Howe and General Cornwallis would have crossed the east branch of the Brandywine River, the second unguarded ford. Remember back to when we were in Kennett Square, the locals told General Howe and General Cornwallis of not one, but two unguarded fords, and that is the second unguarded ford, Jefferis Ford. From there, the British led what's called the Great Defile of Birmingham Road, upcoming here on our right. There's a placard here behind that, just commemorating the Battle of the Brandywine and the fact that the British here led, again, the Great Defile up Birmingham Road, 11,000 strong. If you want to see the Battle of the Brandywine sites, you're going to most certainly have to drive. Only about, I think, 55 acres total is preserved at the actual Battle of the Brandywine National Historic Park. A lot of the aspects of the Battle of the Brandywine are very, very spread out, especially when you look at the logistics of that day. But again, this is the path that the British would have taken to creep up on General Washington and the Continental Army, to crash into us at Birmingham Hill and Sandy Hollow Park. And sadly, they were successful. They used an effective pincer move, which is exactly what General Howe wanted to do. And Birmingham Road here, from a logistical sense, played a very, very key role in doing that. So we're upcoming on Osborne Hill. This is thankfully where the British stopped to rest. They had their lunch, and in very British fashion, they had their tea. They would have stopped here, depending on the troops, they would have stopped here about an hour, hour and a half, maybe up to 2 hours total, before heading southward here on Birmingham Road. And so here we are. This is Osborne Hill. On the left here, this would have been modern day, or Revolutionary Day, I should say, Osborne Hill. Here is the Strode Mill. This mill was here during the Battle of the Brandywine. It was plundered like so many other mills and farms. Many of the Quakers were pacifists. They were neutrals. They wanted nothing to do with the war. And on the day of September 11th, 1777, they were thrusted into the middle of the Revolutionary War. Many mills, as I said, were raided, plundered. Same with the farms. A lot of mills were burned down. It certainly lives up to the name of the Great Defile of Birmingham Road here. So we are now moving onwards towards Birmingham Hill and Sandy Hollow Park. This is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous drive to take. So if you do come, obviously, weather and timing permitting, try to plan it out when either spring is in season, summer's in season, and we have some really beautiful fall foliage down here. Thankfully, actually, New England takes a lot of the attention away from us. Now, I'm going to leave this portion of the drive in for those of you who want to just take in the scenic views and take in the first-hand experience of what the road that the British marched up. This is it. So I'll go quiet from here until Birmingham, and Birmingham Hill, I should say. As always, if you want, use the chapters down below to skip ahead. I'm going to put the windows down, get a nice little rustle effect going on. there is a big drop-off. Wow, such a beautiful part of the country. So at 2 p.m., General Washington is alerted that the British forces under General Howe and General Cornwallis are coming up Birmingham Hill here, which is where we just were. He sends General Stephen, who will be on the far right of the Continental right flank, with the Virginia 3rd and 4th Regiment under his command. Lord Stirling here, who will be in the center of the Continental right flank, with the New Jersey 1st and Pennsylvania 3rd Regiments under his command. And all the way out there past that house, well, at that house and on the other side of that house will be General Sullivan with Maryland's 1st and 2nd Regiment. So again, it was about 2 p.m. that General Washington was alerted to the fact that the British had successfully crossed Jefferis Ford and were coming up Birmingham Hill here. He had to do his best to shore up his right flank. General Sullivan got caught moving into position by the British. He was not able to get set up, to get his men set up in the lines and the rank and the position that he wanted to be in. They collapsed pretty quickly. They would have collapsed and they would have retreated right up over this hill. And then on the other side of that tree line is Sandy Hollow Park, which is where also some of the most intense fighting of the Battle of Brandywine took place. And then from there, they went into Dilworth Town. Now, thankfully, the Virginia 3rd and 4th Regiment under General Stephen here on our, you got to picture these houses not being there. They would have been, out there. They did a good job holding the line, as did Lord Stirling here with the New Jersey 1st and the Pennsylvania 3rd Regiments under his command. Those two generals did a very good job shoring up the Continental right flank to the best of their ability, but they were going up against the superior British and Hessian forces. And those forces were better trained, better equipped, and better suited for the fight in every sense of the word on September 11th, 1777. But they did remark in a sense of it's almost kind of a respect, a mutual admiration that I guess occurs amongst men who fight sometimes, is they remarked they were surprised and had a kind of a reverence for the way that the Continental Army held their own here for a while. And it was where Marquis de Lafayette on Birmingham Hill here, where he was famously wounded trying to rally the Continental right flank. Marquis de Lafayette would go on to continue to try to do his best to shore up the Continental right flank, rally the men on, and then he was obviously forced to retreat too. That would make him a fan favorite both amongst the men and amongst General Washington. So Birmingham Hill here, what a gorgeous place to be. It always feels almost wrong to stand in such a gorgeous and scenic place when you know what unfolded here. But so now we want to go, our placards down there. If you guys ever come out to Birmingham Hill here, obviously if you just want to stop and look at the placard, you can. But there is a beautiful walking path all around Birmingham Hill here. And I'd say, it's not quite a mile. Maybe it's about a mile, but it's pretty hilly. So make sure you're suited for a walk if you want to do it. But if you're going to come on a beautiful day. It's free. A lot of the scenes at the Battle of the Brandywine are free. This Sandy Hollow Park. You can go down to the Brandywine River Museum to get close to where Chad's Ford is. That's as closest as you can get to where historic Chad's Ford would have been. And here's our Birmingham Hill placard. The Battle of the Brandywine was the largest and longest continuous battle of the American Revolution. Wow. So we were just out in the field looking at it from the center position of where Lord Stirling would have been. As we can see here on the left side of the Continental right flank, General Sullivan, commanding the 1st and 2nd Regiments of Maryland, would have been caught off guard trying to get into position here. Two 12-pound cannons by the British would have been bombarding them. So they were again forced to retreat over that hill there to Sandy Hollow Park and then into Dilworth Town from there. But Lord Sterling and General Stephen again, who had Virginia's 3rd and 4th regiments under his command, they did a very, very good job holding off Cornwallis and both the Crown forces and the Hessian forces under his command here. So they would have had grenadiers, Jaegers, light infantry, British grenadiers, and two 12-pound cannons. Wow. And then on the other side, they would have also complemented that with two other 12-pound cannons. That's absolutely massive for the time period. And by contrast, right, we had 4 3-pound gun batteries here in the center under Sterling's command. Stephen would have had 2 3-pound gun batteries. We're actually going to look at the 3-pound replica cannon when we get to Sandy Hollow Park next. So I just wanted to look here at the overall battle map, the tactics that were played out here. Again, Sullivan gets routed trying to get in position. Sterling and Stephen do a very good job holding their own. Marquis de Lafayette will come in trying to both rally the Continental flank. He gets injured here. He continues to go on to rally them for as long as possible before it becomes clear that we have to retreat to Dilworth Town. And then we go from Dilworth Town to setting up our final defense at the William Brinton properties. So that's where the ending of this video will obviously be. And we've made it to Sandy Hollow Heritage Park. Here's our replica 3-pound cannon. This is the type of cannons that you would have found in the Continental Army. For those of you who watched our Valley Forge tour, you know General Knox was our chief artillery officer throughout the Revolutionary War. General Knox would have been here at the Battle of the Brandywine. He did not have a formal command that day, but he was most certainly present. And he was actually present at the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine, which took place just over that ridge there, about a mile or so away on the Brinton family farm. So again, this is just a replica cannon, but these are the types of cannons that the Continental Army would have been using to try to defend Birmingham Hill, which is where we just came from. Behind that tree line is Birmingham Road. Birmingham Hill is down over there. We were talking about where General Sullivan and the rest of the Continental Army inevitably had to retreat to. This is it. This is Sandy Hollow Heritage Park here. This would have been the last essentially stop before going to Dilworth Town. But yeah, this is awesome. This is a replica 3-pound cannon that would have absolutely, you know, the real deal would have absolutely been set up here at Sandy Hollow Heritage Park. Let's take a look down here. Sandy Hollow Heritage Park and Birmingham Hill are preserved open spaces that allow for public access to a portion of the Battle of the Brandywine National Historic Landmark. Some of the most intense fighting of the Battle of the Brandywine took place right here on Sandy Hollow after we were just at Birmingham Hill. So Birmingham Hill and Sandy Hollow, some of the most intense fighting took place on that day. And we can see here from our image, you know, obviously this is just a replica image, but this is how our cannons would have been set up. Positioned strategically to try to help defend our locations here, but sadly they were not able to do so. So now let's go take a look at our placards down below. As we talked about at Birmingham Hill, this is essentially Sandy Hollow Park. This is where General Stephen and the 3rd and 4th Virginia regiments would have been. After marching about 17 miles and 9 hours from Kennett Square. This is where the British would have came up. Birmingham Hill is over there. That's Birmingham Road behind that tree line. As we can see, the overall battle tactics map, right? This is the heart of Kennett Square. General von Kynphausen comes down Great Post Road to distract General Washington here at Chad's Ford, making him think that potentially the bulk of the British forces are here. But in fact, The British under Howe and Cornwallis are coming up over Trimble Ford, which we looked at, right? Then they're going to cross over the east branch of the Brandywine River at Jefferis Ford here before leading the Great Defile up Birmingham Road. And as we talked about, the battle is really, really spread out. So where we were standing at Birmingham Hill was essentially the center. That's where Lord Stirling would have been all the way at over that hill and that house was. That's where Sullivan would have been closer down to the river there. Stephen would have been right here. And down there, all the way down there at the bottom, in between essentially Sandy Hollow Park and Birmingham Hill, is where Marquis de Lafayette was wounded. So from here, as we see, right, we get routed, the British come in, and we have to fall back into modern-day Dilworth Town before standing up the famous semicircle, the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. Now, Nathaniel Greene set this up, but it was also Henry Knox. General Wayne would have been off to the left, and Casimir Pulaski would have made the famous charge that saved General Washington's life up modern-day Oakland Road. So Sandy Hollow Heritage Park is absolutely beautiful. It is free to the public. It's one of the most important aspects of the Battle of the Brandywine. This placard is pretty much the same and has a little bit, different information varying. It talks about the 17 miles and the 9-hour march that General Howe and General Cornwallis would have made, stopping at Osborne Hill, as we talked about. Thank goodness they stopped, because them stopping for about 2 hours total collectively on the aggregate allowed Stephen, where we are now, we're in Stephen's position here. We're essentially where the 3rd Virginia Regiment would have been set up. 4th Virginia Regiment would have been right over there. And Sullivan, right, again, would have been far out there, and he would have been routed. So, if you ever are in this area, come to Sandy Hollow Heritage Park. It's just down the road from Birmingham Hill there. And then from here, you can go to the Brinton Preserve and the Brinton 1704 house. So I'm not going to read all of this because a lot of this is what we've talked about. But what I just wanted to showcase here is Lieutenant General Charles Cornwallis. At Brandywine, the British general would have once again had his chance to bag the fox, Washington, General Washington, that eluded him 9 months before at the Battle of Trenton. And so that was really, if I didn't mention that earlier, that was really what they were trying to do here, the British. The British were trying to force the Continental Army into a clear, decisive victory where they could either kill and or capture Washington. They came extremely close to doing that. We'll talk about that in the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. But that's what General Howe wanted, and that's what he instilled here in his Lieutenant General, in Charles Cornwallis. They wanted to catch the Continental Army out in open battle. They wanted to crush us. They wanted to kill or capture General Washington. And they wanted to move from here, where we are in modern-day Chadds Ford, right down Great Post Road, as it was called. It's modern-day Route 1, which you can take right into the city. And that is what the British inevitably did. Thankfully, as we'll talk about, Casimir Pulaski's final defense efforts helped save General George Washington's life. But like pretty much everywhere else in the Battle of the Brandywine, this is free to come to. This is really beautiful. This is right off of Birmingham Road, I should say, right behind Sandy Hollow Heritage Park there. And here we are. We are at the Battle of the Brandywines, the final defense. As pacifist Quakers, many Brinton family members abhorred the war that was going on here at their 1704 house. Now, this is a historical site. It's open on the weekend starting here in May. Private property right now, so I'm going to stay back here. But the Brinton 1704 house is where General Knox, General Greene, and General Washington would have set up the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine before General Washington would have escaped down there to Great Post Road, before then taking over to Concord Road to get safely into Chester. Now, two key things happen here, right? The semicircle that's set up by Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox inflict heavy casualties on the advancing Crown forces and delay them long enough for a lot of the Continental Army to also get down Great Post Road towards Concord Road. Also, right up this road itself, Oakland Road itself, is where Casimir Pulaski leads his famous charge. Casimir Pulaski's famous charge really doesn't get enough credit. It should be talked about equally as much as Nathaniel Greene's rear guard defense here, because he leads about 30 to 40 commander-in-chief guards in a cavalry charge up Oakland Road here, straight into the heart of the enemy at Dilworth, delays them long enough that saved General Washington's life. General Washington's life could have ended right here on the William Brinton property. But thankfully, Casimir Pulaski, quite literally to the rescue, up that road where the black Jeep is now heading. That's where he took the 30 to 40 Commander-in-Chief Guard in the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. And again, it took place on the Brinton house, William Brinton, 1704. It's not open right now. It's private property, so I'm going to stay back here. It is open in May. It was constructed in 1704. The Brinton family founded the oldest township here in Westchester and Chester County, directly from William Penn in 1684. Wow. So this would have been built by William the Builder. He was William Jr. William Sr., also known as William the Elder, is who set up Birmingham Township from William Penn back in 1684, springtime actually of 1684, the original 850-acre patent. So if you're ever in this area, come to the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. Again, you need tickets to go to the Brinton 1704 house, but this is free over there, the Brinton Preserve. So you can go and you can walk around some of the aspects of the final defense of the Battle of the Brandywine. I thank each and every one of you for watching, and I really do appreciate your time. Take care, everybody.